special review that has been in the works for a little over a year now. This is a model 1860 Spencer produced by Cimarron Firearms. And they've done some really great things with this reproduction. And full disclosure, they did send me this rifle for T&E. Now, my experience with Italian-produced reproductions, especially by Cimarron, is that they are outstanding, not only reproductions, but outstanding and reliable firearms. Compared to the original, depending on what your thought process is behind buying an original or reproduction, it all depends on what you're going to do with it. If it's something you're going to take out to the range regularly, that you want to shoot often, then I would steer clear of the original for that purpose. But if you want something for, be it Civil War reenacting, cowboy action, whatever it might be, or you're just a history buff, maybe you're fascinated by the fact that this is the first repeating long arm ever adopted by the federal government. And its introduction into federal service is kind of interesting in that this rifle was demonstrated for Abraham Lincoln by the creator of the firearm itself. Now, that version was a rifle length version. This is the carbine. The carbine length versions generally were only carried by cavalry, but there are cases where these found their way into the hands of infantrymen as well during the American Civil War. Hundreds of thousands of these were procured during the American Civil War, and they made their way to the front with devastating results. The Confederacy, while it did produce their own repeating long arms in very limited numbers, those saw, unfortunately, very limited use for them as the Federal Army advanced with more and more modern weaponry like this. Now, this one is chambered in .45 long Colt for ease of shooting and ease of reviewing. I can run up to practically any small gun shop, and they'll usually have a box or two of .45 LC. And I'll say with the loads that I was using out of this, I didn't experience any issues with that ammunition, with the exception of not being able to hit anything beyond 200 yards accurately. Now, the loads I was using were mostly cowboy action loads, so they tend to have less powder in them, less recoil, and if you're looking to push this rifle a little further, you're probably going to hand load the rounds yourself or get some hotter rounds. And that's the beauty of going with a reproduction instead of an original, because you can shoot modern smokeless ammunition out of it. So it's a lot less stressful than shooting an original, especially with how much money you'll likely have tied up in that compared to this, which is a new firearm. You can get replacement parts for it. It can be serviced easily. And as a modern firearm, it also has a beautiful, beautiful coating on it. And I've done almost nothing to this rifle since getting it in over a year ago. I've wiped it down maybe once or twice in that time. I've put about 350 to 400 rounds through this now, and overall I'm very excited about this rifle. It's why I brought it to you today and why I took so long with this review. Now, the wood itself, also just beautiful, and I'm not sure how well this comes across in the video, but the fit and finish of this is really top-notch. They did an absolutely amazing job with this reproduction. I really can't stress that enough. So if it's something you're looking to jump into for the second kind of cool, you're a history buff, you're a reenactor, I wouldn't hesitate. But do understand there are some limitations with it as a reliable firearm, in the sense that the extraction can be kind of weak at times. Now, a lot of that I could chalk it up to me, mostly being too gentle with the action itself, but you'll see a few times where I either had to pull the round out myself after firing, or you'll see some issues where I accidentally induced a double feed. So that could take the rifle down quite catastrophically. So you should be carrying some type of tools with you when you bring this to the range. You will have to remove this flathead screw and drop the entire action out to clear any critical malfunction in this rifle. Beyond that, though, there's really not a lot that can go wrong, because it is such a simple rifle. And if you're looking at this because maybe you live in an area where the laws are very restrictive as to what you could own, I would steer you more into an 1870s, 1880s lever action versus going with this. But if you're looking for that second kind of cool because of the significance of this firearm, because it continued to serve in the US military well into the 1870s, the fact that this carbine variant was seen at numerous famous engagements in the Indian Wars and the American Civil War, and really was in its day an absolute game changer, then this is definitely something you want to add to your collection. Now, as far as the sights and some of the features, let's talk about those real quick. You do have a couple of sling mounting options here, and again, the carbine variant set up for cavalry. It's kind of a single point sling setup almost, the way that it works. Technically 2-point, but it tends to kind of dangle a bit, and it's not the best sling system in the world. I'm sure that you could jerry rig something if that was really something you had to have. For me, I'm just going to run it with no sling. It's perfectly fine for me to just carry it as is. Now, as far as the sights, let's get into those real quick as well. You've got a basic blade sight on the front, a volley sight on the rear. As I said, accuracy beyond 200 yards was really difficult for me to achieve. I could not hit a steel plate at the 200-yard mark that I was aiming at. It would fall to the left, to the right of it, right in front of it. Just could not make impact with the steel because of the rounds I was using. And as I said, I'm probably just not that good of a shot anyway. So now, as far as the action goes, it's very, very strong. And it's just a really, really cool action to play with. The entire thing drops out. That's really the guts of the rifle right there. And that's what you'll have to remove if you induce a malfunction as well, by popping that screw out. And then don't be afraid to manhandle it a little bit. She can take it, give it a good slap. Now, one other drawback I will say, and something to be aware of with this design, is the half cock on it. The half cock is capable of firing around. So if you're going back, let's say you've chambered around and it's clear right now, okay? You've chambered around and that's your half cock. There's your full cock. But let's say you get it to about here and you let go. That's enough to actually fire the round. So that's something to be very aware of, that you need to have this pointed in a safe direction when you're using it. Because if this slips, it's gonna go off. Now that half cock, once it's in there, it's locked tight. But generally speaking, I would wait to chamber around and be ready to actually use this. Wait until you're on the field. Now, obviously, depending on your unit's regulations, if you're buying this for reenacting, or that type of thing, but just be aware of that, because you could be in the ranks, you're loading up. Always maintain muzzle awareness, regardless of whatever the setting is, because you can, as I said, I really can't stress that enough, this will crank a round off, especially if you're using live ammo, and blanks can be equally very dangerous at close distances, so be aware of that as well. Other than that, I don't really have a ton else to say today on the model 1860 Spencer by Cimarron. If you're gonna get one of these as a reenactor, check with your unit, make sure it's appropriate for the impression that you're doing, or have events that you want to go to in mind that would allow you to carry it. Now, I would recommend that you go with the rifle version over the carbine version. Some events get kind of weird about two-banded and shorter barrel rifles, even though they are perfectly appropriate for a lot of settings. Just keep that in mind. If you're going to spend the money, check with your unit commander, leadership, any senior people in the group before you jump into something like this if it's for that purpose. Other than that, like I said, really a great firearm. I would highly encourage you to check these out. Check out Cimarron. They have a whole line of other products, other historic firearms, and I'll be reviewing a number of those on the channel in the coming weeks. Stay tuned.